Have you ever wondered what goes in the process of buying a house? Today I'm going to take you step by step what happens during the process from making an offer to actually receiving your keys. Now, there are a few things that go in. These are components of an offer, which is the purchase and sale agreement. One of those things are price, which is the price, either the price that you are offering, or probably if it's different from the listing price, then so it's very important, the price. Number two is the earnest money, your commitment to the whole process as a buyer, just to show that you're serious. Number four is the down payment, how much you are putting down to purchase the house. And number five is the type of loan, whether you're using FHA or you're using conventional or you're using VA if you're a veteran, sometimes USDA if the property is in the rural areas or upcountry, something like that. So very important that, financing, what is going to be your financing. The next thing is contingencies. So contingencies are components that will need to be fulfilled or need to be satisfied before other things. Like the parts that needs to be done, or without them, they are make or break conditions within the contract. So this could be inspection, financing, or appraisal, all that. The next one will be items included. Sometimes you realize that somebody is selling, but he is including the TVs, including the fridges and all that stuff. Sometimes the buyer wants them, sometimes the seller is, no, I'm taking them. So it's very important that you as a realtor help your buyer to make sure that they are negotiated properly. The next thing will be seller concessions, which is the seller. What is seller offering? Is the seller offering any credits? Is the seller paying the compensation for the buyer's broker, or is he offering any credits, like more or less just like a discount? So this list is very, very important, and now your realtor has to be very smart in arranging this, because these are the things that make your offer either to be accepted, rejected, or countered. Now that I've just pre-mentioned the three, that is, your offer can be accepted, rejected, or countered, then which counter means that the offer is to be negotiated. If it is rejected, you just out. Or if it's accepted, it's good for you. We move on to the next. Now, countering the offer can most of the time change the price, or it can change the contributions, which is the credits that the seller is offering. So it's very important to know what you're going to negotiate with during this time. The next thing, let's say that your offer has been accepted or it was countered, and you moved back and forth with the buyer, making a counter offer and the seller also countering. At some point you have to agree, but if it goes well that you agree, then you move to the next step, that is the earnest money. So the buyer has to make a deposit of the earnest money, which is usually about 1%. It can be less, it doesn't matter. Sometimes others also put it as high as 3 or 4%. I've seen people put it high. I don't do that most of the time. I don't recommend putting it so high because it's money at stake at a certain point. So anyway, so the buyer deposits the earnest money. The next thing that we move on is we move on to opening an escrow and title. So once that commitment is being made, then the escrow, which is just a third party and is a neutral party that helped the two parties, which is the buyer side and the seller side. So they come in as a neutral party to help them with the documentation, help them with the funding, so that holding the funds, so that the funds are held somewhere neutral, and also just making sure that the transaction moves smoothly right from offer to closing. So that is the work of the escrow. So the escrow will actually open the title for you. Now the next thing from there, if that one is done, then we go to home inspection, which is the fifth step. So home inspection, the buyer most of the time is required to order inspection and pay for inspection. So, and during inspection, the inspector comes in, who is a specialist, to check the integrity of the house. They will check the roof, they'll check the foundation, check the plumbing. There are so many things that might look very nice from a distance or just with an eye like this, but behind the wall something might be faulty. The plumbing might be faulty, electrical, HVAC system, appliances, or any other safety thing. So the inspectors do all that. They check and make sure that the integrity of the house is either intact or not, and they will give you a report. And when that report comes back, then the buyer uses that as a contingency, whether to move ahead or negotiate further or come out. Now, so the buyer can decide that he wants to ask the seller to make repairs if they deem that the repairs are things that once they are repaired they can live with. That's okay. If not, they can decide to walk away, or they can also just accept the house as it is. So inspection is a very important stage for the buyer, and I advise that every buyer should do an inspection. The next thing is repairs and negotiation that I've talked about. So if the buyer is repaired, let's say that you've decided to move ahead and the buyer has requested the seller to do the repairs, so the buyers will do that. But the buyer can also decide, instead of doing the repairs, to offer to either reduce the price so that the seller can just take the house the way it is, but reduce the price for the amount that both will agree that is reasonable. Another thing, that the seller can offer more credit, which is basically offering some discounts to the seller that the seller can use and add on their closing costs, and also decline. But they'll say in this case the seller and the buyer agrees to move ahead. If they agree to move ahead, we go to step number 7, appraisal. Now the seller gives the price most of the time, which is the listing price. However, if the house is being financed, the bank wants to make sure a few things. 1, they make sure that they are not overpaying you for the house. 2, they want to make sure that this house is the right price. 3, they want to ensure that the house, the integrity of the house is intact. They want to make sure that the house is actually marketable. So it's very important that the buyer or through their lender, orders an appraisal. So an appraiser comes in, who is a specialist in determining the price, comes in and it checks everything physically, makes measurements, does comparison between this house, the subject house, and other similar house around that place to determine the value of the house. This is another contingency for the buyer, to mean that if the results come out, like the price come back, and for example, the price of the house is lower than what the seller had already put in, the buyer can, say that, you know what, Mr. Seller, you take the price down. I mean, this is what is the appraised value, take it down. Or you can ask, okay, let's negotiate. You can go 50-50. You can meet each other halfway. If it is 450 and the listing price was 500, you can decide to meet each other at 425, 475 for me. Another thing, the buyer can decide to walk out. So the appraisal is another part of negotiation. So let's say that both the buyer and the seller agree at a certain point. Then we move on to the next one, which is step number 8, loan underwriting. So what happens is the lender will review the file of the buyer once again, and it's very, very important that even though you are already in a contract as a buyer to buy a house, does not mean that you already cleared to buy a house, does not mean that the house is yours. Things can change, and because your file is being reviewed again, it is very important that you don't engage in any financial extravagance. You need to maintain your financial your finances very well. It's not time to buy another car. It's not time to buy another big TV or getting any other debt or spend anyhow or change bank accounts and open other ones and get another credit card. It's very important that during the process of home buying, that you as a buyer, you remain very vigilant during this time, especially with your finances. So the lender will go through your file once again to establish that we are still good the way we are at the beginning. So if your loan passes the underwriting process, guess what? We are moving to closing. We are heading to closing right now. So we have that your loan gets cleared to close. And when your loan is getting cleared to close, then other things that might need to be put in place is things like insurance. So the lender will ensure that that the house is insured with some homeowners insurance. Then the next thing will be final walkthrough. So your real estate agent will take you back to the house again physically to go and check, because so much can happen within 30 days or within the days that you are doing all this transaction. Another thing that is very important for the walkthrough, that is the buyer to go back to the house and check the house again, is because they want to make sure that the changes that you requested for earlier from the seller to make changes or repairs, have they done them the way you requested them to? So it's very important that the buyer goes through the house again. And then finally, before last, we have closing disclosure. So closing disclosure basically means that the lender is going to give a report of how the finances have been distributed and what needs to be paid. Is like a statement of all the finances, how much was used to pay for insurance, how much was going to the title company, how much is paid for underwriting, how much was paid for recording the title. So all the statements. So I recommend, as a buyer, you need to take your time and go through every line, because that is where your money is distributed. Sometimes we find a lot of mistakes, and mistake in that line means that you are either losing money. So make sure that you go through the closing disclosure very well. The next thing is signing and closing documents. So after that, the closing company or the escrow or the title company will give you guys a date to go and sign papers, and it's a lot of signing, trust me. So we'll come with the papers this thick that include all the documentation that they have been working on ever since inception on to the last, and you will be signing each one of them, and then after that you will need to make payment. So this is where you pay the closing costs, if there are closing costs that you needed to pay, and then this is the time that you also bring the money, which is the down payment, and any other proration that probably according to the closing disclosure. So whatever was marked there that you bring, that is the time to pay, or bring that you bring either in a check, or I hardly see people bring cash, but most of the time it's a check, or they do wire transfer. And then after that, the escrow will take the or the title company will record the title, which is the deed. They will literally take it to the court for recording, and then once it's recorded, then the lender will wire the money in the seller's bank account, and guess what? As soon as the money reflects, that's it, you get your keys. And isn't that interesting? I know it's a lot, but it's a very exciting time. At the same time, it's also full of anxiety, but that is why we are here as realtors, to ensure that this process is seamless for you. I do a lot for advising during this time. I do a lot of making sure that my clients do not go through the headache of all this. There's a lot of jargon that go inside there. There's a lot of paperwork. But as a licensed and a trusted advisor, I make sure that I explain every detail to my buyer, and this process becomes very seamless, becomes very enjoyable to them. Thank you so much.